Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I'm so pumped you're here. Today, we're diving headfirst into a deeply debated, incredibly relevant policy source called The Case for Digital Integration in High Schools. Now, whether you are a student, a parent, a teacher, or honestly just someone fascinated by how tech is rewiring our society, this is a topic you've probably thought about, debated, or lived through firsthand. We are unpacking a policy source that totally flips the script on the standard response to smartphones in the classroom.
So, do cell phone bans actually work? It's a super straightforward question, right? But man, the answer is anything that's simple. The source we're looking at today argues that our default reaction to digital distraction, which is usually just absolute zero tolerance prohibition, is actually the exact wrong approach. Instead of just banishing the devices, the author makes the case for a massive fundamental shift in how we handle technology in school.
Okay, let's jump right in. Here is our roadmap for the day. Following the source's structure, we'll hit the cell phone battleground, move on to the illusion of compliance, tackle digital equity and utility, look at training cognitive control, and finally wrap things up with the focus-driven student.
Starting off with part one, this cell phone battleground. To really get where the author is coming from, we've got to set the scene. The source paints this super vivid picture, stating, walking into a high school today can feel like entering a battleground over a pocket-sized piece of plastic and glass. I mean, wow, intense, right? But anyone who's ever tried to pry a teenager away from their screen knows that friction is very real. And because of that friction, the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of school boards is just to shut the whole thing down. Total, uncompromising bans. But our source today is asking us to hit pause and really question if that instinct is actually helping anyone.
According to the text, these blanket bans, they're basically just a reactionary policy. They completely misdiagnose the actual root of the problem. By going with a total ban, schools might feel like they're instantly fixing the distraction issue, but the source argues they are literally robbing young adults of vital real-world preparation. It's a quick fix that ends up creating massive long-term blind spots.
Moving right along to section 2, the illusion of compliance.
The source calls the enforcement of these bans a total cat and mouse game, and it has some pretty severe unintended consequences. The author points out a really interesting contrast. When a total ban is slapped on a school, it rarely actually stops phone use, right? It just drives it underground. So educators who are there to teach and guide suddenly get shoved into the role of compliance officers. Instead of actually teaching, they're burning through valuable class time policing hallways, peeking under desks to catch texters, and getting into these exhausting arguments over confiscating phones. It creates this deeply adversarial vibe that just chips away at the teacher-student relationship.
And the fallout from this kind of enforcement goes way beyond just classroom bickering. The text brings up a super practical, honestly very human point about school safety anxiety. In a time where, unfortunately, school safety is a constant worry in the back of everyone's mind, completely cutting off a student's direct line to their parents causes a ton of stress. As the source argues, severing that emergency lifeline creates a culture of fear, which is the exact opposite of the culture of focus that these schools are trying to build in the first place. All right, on to part 3, digital equity and utility. We almost always talk about smartphones like they're just these massive distraction machines, but the source flips that script to look at their everyday usefulness. Consider this number for a second, $100. By just using graphing calculator apps right on their phones, students can save their families upward of $100. They don't have to go out and buy a totally separate, crazy expensive gadget just for math class. The phone gives them instant access to tools that actively level the playing field. And hey, it's not just about calculators. For a lot of students, especially in districts dealing with tight budgets, their smartphone is literally their main computer. It is a critical bridge across the digital divide. It plugs them into collaborative stuff like Google Classroom, Canvas, and Quizlet, plus it offers essential language translation tools for English language learners. We're talking about an absolute educational lifeline here.
Ultimately, the source makes the case that smartphones act as absolutely crucial backups. You know how it is, school-issued laptops crash, maybe they get forgotten at home, or a district just straight up can't provide them to everyone. When that happens, the student's personal device steps up to the plate. So banning phones actually ends up punishing the exact students who are relying on them just to keep their heads above water with their daily assignments.
Which brings us to section 4, training cognitive control. This is where the source really shifts focus to the future. The author highlights a pretty stark contrast here. When schools completely ban phones, they're basically creating this artificial, synthetic environment that shields students from any digital temptation. But let's be real, that looks absolutely nothing like the real world.
Think about a modern office or a college campus. Are phones banned? No way. They are required tools. You literally need them for everyday communication, you need them for two-factor authentication just to check your email, and you need them to manage your projects.
So, the key takeaway here is this concept of cognitive control. The text defines this as the ability to manage endless digital noise. It's essentially a form of digital discipline. And the author uses this great analogy, comparing it to a muscle. If you just lock the phone away in a pouch all day, you are completely ignoring that muscle. True digital discipline requires active training. It's a skill you have to actively build up, not just hide from. Okay, so how do we actually train that muscle in a classroom? Well, the source lays out a structured game plan. Step 1. Educators implement highly structured, very clear phone-free times during active lectures. Makes sense. But step 2 is where the magic happens. They actually permit phone use during independent work. This gives students the chance to practice managing their own devices, actively teaching them how to balance buckling down and focusing with having the entire digital world right in their pocket.
And finally, Section 5, the focus-driven student. Now, to be clear, the author isn't just ignoring the downsides. The source completely concedes that smartphones bring real psychological and social risks to the table for teenagers. They specifically call out things like cyberbullying and social media addiction. These are massive, serious issues. But the core argument here is that just isolating students from their phones for 7 hours a day is essentially an abdication of responsibility. Pretending the danger doesn't exist while they're in the building doesn't actually prepare them to face it when the bell rings.
Instead, the argument is that schools need to step up and act as a safe harbor, where educators can actively teach digital citizenship. And what does that actually mean? It means teaching young adults how to verify what they're seeing online, how to protect their personal data, and honestly, how to recognize for themselves when their screen time is starting to mess with their mental health. If we just ban the devices outright, we throw away all these vital, everyday teachable moments. We lose the opportunity to guide them when they inevitably mess up.
There's this one quote that really captures the core philosophy of the whole source. High schools shouldn't try to build a wall against the future. They should teach students how to navigate it. A total ban is framed as just an administrative shortcut. Sure, it gives the school this temporary illusion of control, but it fundamentally fails to equip these kids for the wildly tech-saturated world they are about to graduate into. When you boil it all down, the author's entire case for digital integration lands on this one fundamental idea. The goal shouldn't be a phone-free school, but a focus-driven student. It is a massive shift from just eliminating the device to actually educating the student about the device. It's all about empowering them for the long haul. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative question, drawn right from our source material today. By slapping down blanket bans, are we simply building a wall against the future, or are we actually willing to do the hard work of teaching students how to navigate it? It is an absolutely crucial question for education policy moving forward. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.